As Hamdan walked out of the court, the weight of the world on his shoulders, one thought kept repeating in his mind: this wasn't the end, this was only the beginning. Hamdan walked out of the grand court, his heartbeat loud in his ears. His father's words echoed in his mind: prove it. But how? How was he supposed to undo the damage that had already been done? The media had crucified him, his wife had publicly humiliated him, and his once loyal followers had turned against him. As he stepped into the palace corridor, a familiar voice called out, "Sheikh Hamdan." He turned to see his closest advisor, Omar, rushing toward him, his face tense with urgency. "You need to see this," Omar said, handing him a tablet. Hamdan took it, his stomach twisting as he saw a live news broadcast. The screen showed his wife, standing before a crowd of reporters, her expression calm but her words sharp like a blade. "I stood by him as a loyal wife," she said into the microphones, her voice steady. "I believed in his promises. But he betrayed me. And now, I refuse to be silent. The world must know that even the most powerful men are not above consequences." Hamdan's grip on the tablet tightened. "She's still talking about this?" He clenched his jaw. "How much more does she want to destroy me?" Omar exhaled. "She's making sure you never recover from this. And the worst part? People are listening. The damage isn't just to your image, it's to the family, to everything you once represented." Hamdan looked away, frustration boiling in his veins. "What's my next move?" He wasn't asking Omar for advice, he was demanding a solution. Omar hesitated. "We need to change the narrative. Right now, you're just reacting to her moves. You need to control the story," Hamdan scoffed. "And how do I do that?" "Go on live TV and beg for forgiveness." Omar's expression darkened. "No. You fight back." Hamdan turned sharply to face him. "Fight back? How? She has the public on her side." Omar leaned in, his voice low but firm. "Because she's the only one talking. She's painting herself as the victim, and you're the villain. But what if we turn the tables? What if we expose the truth, your truth?" Hamdan's eyes narrowed. "What truth?" Omar hesitated, then lowered his voice even more. "You think she did all this alone? You think she just happened to have all this evidence, all these connections in the media? Someone helped her, Hamdan. Someone powerful. And if we can find out who, we might be able to stop this before it's too late." Hamdan processed Omar's words, the gears in his mind turning. This wasn't just a personal attack, this was calculated. Find out everything. He finally said, his voice dark with determination. "Who helped her? Who fed her the information? I want names, Omar. I want the truth." Omar gave a sharp nod. "Consider it done." As Hamdan handed back the tablet, his pulse steadied. This wasn't just about redemption anymore, this was war. That night, Hamdan stood on the balcony of his private quarters, looking over the shimmering city lights of Dubai. The place he once ruled with pride now felt distant, like a kingdom slipping from his grasp. His mind was a battlefield, torn between rage and regret. He wasn't innocent, he knew that. But was he truly the monster the world believed him to be? A soft knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. "Come in," he said, not bothering to turn around. Omar stepped inside, his expression unreadable. "We found something," he said quietly. Hamdan finally turned, his eyes sharp. "Tell me." Omar took a breath before speaking. "Your wife didn't do this alone. She had help, someone powerful, someone with an agenda. And I think you already know who." Hamdan's chest tightened. A name formed in his mind before Omar even spoke it aloud: Sheikh Zion. The words felt like poison on his tongue. Zion, his father's most trusted political ally. The man who had always smiled in his face yet waited for an opportunity to see him fall. Hamdan exhaled slowly, his fingers curling into fists. He wants me out of the way, Omar nodded grimly. And he used the one person who had every reason to destroy you, your wife. He fed her the resources, the media connections, the influence. He made sure that once she pulled the trigger, you'd never recover. Hamdan let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. Of course. And I was blind enough to think this was just about a broken marriage. Omar hesitated, then said something that made Hamdan's blood turn to ice. There's more. Hamdan's gaze snapped up. What do you mean, more? Omar handed him a folder. Zion didn't just want to ruin you. He wanted to replace you. There have been secret meetings. Discussions about naming a new heir. Your father hasn't agreed yet, but he's listening. A sharp breath left Hamdan's lips, his heart pounding painfully. He's considering cutting me off permanently, he whispered, more to himself than to Omar. Silence filled the room. For the first time in his life, Hamdan felt something he had never truly known before, fear. Not fear of losing power, but fear of losing who he was. His whole life, he had been Sheikh Hamdan bin Mohammed al-Maktoum, the crown prince. The future ruler. The man who could never fall, and now he was just a broken headline. A disgrace. A liability. Omar stepped closer. His voice lower but urgent. You can't let them win, Hamdan. You can't just stand here and let them erase you. Hamdan looked down at the folder in his hands, his jaw tightening. He had two choices. He could walk away. Accept his fate. Fade into history as the prince who lost everything. Or, he could fight. He could remind the world who he was. Lifting his head, a dangerous fire lit up his dark eyes. I won't let them take everything from me. Omar met his gaze. Then what's the plan? Hamdan's voice was cold, sharp as steel. We hit back. Hard. If my wife wants war, if Zion wants me gone, then they'll see exactly what happens when you try to bury a man who was born to rule. Omar smirked slightly. Now that sounds like the Hamdan I know. Hamdan stepped past him, his mind already forming the first strike. This wasn't just about proving his innocence. This was about reclaiming his throne. The palace was silent, but Hamdan's mind was roaring with thoughts. His own wife had turned against him, his father was considering his exile, and his enemies were closer than ever. But he wasn't going to fall without a fight. Omar stood beside him as they walked down the dimly lit corridor. We need to act fast, he muttered. The longer you stay silent, the more power they gain over the narrative. Hamdan stopped suddenly, turning to face him. Then let's take the narrative away from them. Let's show the world the truth, my truth. Omar raised an eyebrow. And how do you plan on doing that? Hamdan smirked, though there was no humor in his eyes. By doing what I should have done from the start, reminding everyone who I am. The next morning, a new headline. The entire Arab world woke up to a shocking new headline. Sheikh Hamdan finally speaks. The other side of the story. News channels, social media platforms, and newspapers were flooded with a single video. Hamdan, seated in a grand but simple setting, his expression calm but intense. The world had expected him to deny, to beg for forgiveness, but he did neither. Instead, his words were like a blade, cutting through the accusations. I have remained silent not because I was guilty, but because I was watching. Watching how easily the world turns against a man when one side of the story is louder. But now, it's time to speak. He leaned forward, his dark eyes piercing through the screen. Yes, my marriage was not perfect. Yes, mistakes were made. But betrayal? Let me ask you, who truly betrayed whom? A slideshow of documents, messages, and leaked emails appeared on the screen.